The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I move the motion which stands in my name on the notice paper that this House condemns the Cook Labor government for pushing ahead with its motorplex in Burswood Park, which has no local community support, and for prioritising this project ahead of other infrastructure in Western Australia. Mr Speaker, at the last update, change.org, the online petition, had almost 9,000 signatures. And today, in the other place, an online petition is being submitted with over 3,000 signatures and a paper petition with over 2,000 signatures. So don't need you all to do the maths, but we're at 14,000 and almost 15,000 signatures. There was a rally of concerned locals today on the steps of Parliament House. I note that it wasn't attended by any members of the government. However, it was explained that an invitation was forwarded and that a reply was received. But my understanding is, and the organisers did mention this at the start, that because of the lateness of the reply back, their decision was to stand with proceedings as they were. Nonetheless, that wasn't for me to organise. That's the way it rolled out. And there was a large crowd of locals. When I say locals, I mean people from the Vic Park area. I mean also people from East Perth and the surrounding locales on both sides of the Swan River. People who are concerned that prior to the announcement of this project, and an announcement of this project as a done deal, not as a we might be going to build a racetrack, or what do you think if we build a racetrack, or this is a good idea, it happens in other places, we might consider doing this. It wasn't that sort of announcement. It wasn't an announcement that said we're going to build a racetrack on Burswood Park. It was presented as a fait accompli. And so today a large gathering of concerned locals who feel that this is a project that has had no, prior to that point, no community consultation, and questionable community consultation since then. Also no demand. There doesn't appear to be large sections of the community who have been calling for a racetrack at Burswood Park or a street circuit elsewhere, and also there has been no business case. And we're seeing a pattern here from this state government of a lack of transparency when it comes to these sorts of projects and these sorts of commitments. Now, the member for Vic Park and the member for South Perth, we haven't really been able to get straight commitments from them. Do they support the project? Not sure. They haven't said much. When they get asked, they sort of feign interest but have not been definitive, and perhaps that tells us something. I do note, though, that both members did an initial post on the Facebook and Instagram about the racetrack announcement during the election campaign. And since then, it's been really radio silence from them. And typically, if there's a big project being announced in your area, project to the value of $220 million, well, normally you jump on board. You go, this is you beauty, this is going to change my local area. I'm very enthusiastic about this. Get the bells and whistles out. Let's get on, everybody. But no, there hasn't been any of that. It's been very low-key from both the member for South Perth and from the member for Vic Park. Now, the Minister had a Dorothy Dixer last week about if there had been many calls for more motorsport events in Perth, and at that point I did think she was going to go through all the list and all the groups who wanted a new racetrack at Burswood, but actually what we got was a reference to me at a City of Perth event and nothing else. And that was the City of Perth event. That was the start of the rally event that happens every year, that for the last 200,000 years, not quite that long, Acting Speaker, but for the last long time anyway, has launched in the City of Perth, in Forest Place. And the Lord Mayor of the day, or the Deputy Mayor, if the Lord Mayor's been unavailable, or one of the councillors or a local MP, have come along and waved the flag symbolically. We were asked, did we seek public consultation for that? Well, no. Bringing events like that into the city is what we do. And that motorsport event travelled out of the city on the Friday night and off out into the suburbs and then beyond into country areas. So this was the Minister's chance to inform us who actually supports the racetrack, who in the community wants it. But there were no names. It was just sort of poking fun at me. Now, fortunately, I can handle that. That's the good news. But on the back of overwhelming disapproval for this project, the government said they'd consult. They've rushed a consultation process between now and June. And after they announced their consultation, they then released a tender for the scope for design and construction works before consultation concluded. But what exactly, Acting Speaker, are they consulting on? Both the Premier and the Minister have said that regardless of community feedback, they are going ahead with the racetrack. So what's the consultation on? The government points to the Burswood Park Board's master plan and 20-year vision, which was released in November 2023. I was at that event. I was pleased to be there as the Lord Mayor of the City of Perth. It was a breakfast at Optus Stadium, and you could overlook the area. And it talked about a number of initiatives that have now featured in the government's plan. It talked about an amphitheatre. It talked about other developments around the park, but it did not talk about a racetrack. Nowhere did it say a racetrack. We've also highlighted how this rushed process for a pet project is affecting local groups. I was informed yesterday, and I'm very pleased about this, from Telethon Community Cinemas, that they have now met with the government and are now not being forced to move. So, thank you, Minister. I'm very pleased about that development, and I hope the government can work with them on a permanent solution for their organisation at Burswood. 24 years they've been in the one spot. So where is the support for this project? Now, the member for Lansdale, who's here, he let the cat out of the bag at a community forum. He told attendees that it was, in fact, V8 supercars who approached the government about this project. It didn't come from the local community. It was V8 supercars who said, oh, we stayed at Crown and there's a nice little bit of land there in between the stadium and Crown. That looks tremendous. That looks tremendous. What about we put a V8 supercar track there? And the government says, oh, great idea. Now, what if they were staying at Dumar House and heaven forbid they looked at Kings Park and said, oh, that's a good location for a V8 supercars track? Would the state government say, oh, okay, then we'll put it there. We'll put it there. And the point is, not a bad idea, Frank. It might be the one thing that we agree on, actually. I'm not so sure about that, member for Mount Lawley. But the point, Acting Speaker, is...
Sorry, Deputy Speaker.
Sorry.
That's the fourth time.
Sorry, I'm going to write that down. Sorry, Deputy Speaker.
You shouldn't have to.
Sorry, Deputy Speaker.
It's only one of me.
My apologies. So, Deputy Speaker, the point being that, so an out-of-town and a national body, we welcome them. We're a big sporting city, we know that. They come to town and they go, that'd be a great place for a V8 supercars track. And so the state government says, yeah, fine, let's do it. No public consultation before the announcement, no business case, no transparency. That's not how we do business here. Or is it? Are we seeing a pattern start to develop? Now, given the poor approach that the government has taken to selling the need for a racetrack, there are lots of unanswered questions from community about the project itself. And I want to use this opportunity to raise these questions in perhaps the hope that the Minister might respond. So the business case. On the issue of the business case, we're unsure if a business case has in fact been produced for this project, Deputy Speaker. The Minister should inform the House of this. I think that would be the right thing to do. Has the government undertaken any form of economic evaluation or modelling, such as, for example, cost-benefit analysis, business case, or an economic impact report on the racetrack? And if so, who provided the figures? Was it V8 supercars? We were promised, of course, during the conversations about the rugby team of the full economic report, the full details. And in fact, we'll all recall, members, that on the day of the announcement, which was an announcement that was made a week prior on a social media video but then played a week later, that there was a page released, one page, not the full-blown economic impact, but one page, a summary if you like. Nonetheless, what is it that we are going to get, if indeed any of it has been done? And does the Minister have confidence in the data provided by V8 supercars, if in fact it has come from them? And will the Minister release in full any of this work? Now, the other question for me is around recurring costs and what the estimated annual costs are, inclusive of event fees and all other recurring cost items. So, for example, to stage the combined Wanneroo Raceway and Burswood Park Motorplex 10-day event, what is that going to cost? The government is building this racetrack for the specific purpose of hosting a V8 supercar event. So it is appropriate that this information should already be known and have been assessed as value for money for the taxpayer. And there's another issue that I think hasn't had a lot of attention, but it was mentioned to me today actually by one of the concerned residents, and It's a shame that it hasn't had perhaps the spotlight or attention that it should have, and that is the cultural heritage impact on Burswood Park. And so I ask, has the government undertaken full ethnographic and archaeological surveys specific to this site and as required by the Aboriginal Heritage Act? I think that is a question that deserves to be asked, and the right thing to do is to answer that question. And that, of course, is to assess the extent of potential impacts prior to undertaking the process and planning. Or has that been just waved to one side? And has the government consulted with traditional owners? And if so, what is their feedback on the project? And certainly some of the residents that I spoke to today were interested to ask me if this had been done. I did not have the answer for them, Deputy Speaker, but perhaps those opposite can help. Noise implications. So many of those who gathered here today on the steps of Parliament House were worried about the noise implications, and they'd like to know what is the expected noise levels during the V8 event. They're concerned because of similar experiences by residents in New South Wales when the Newcastle 500 Supercars event was being run. Queensland-based environmental services experts, SIRS, published noise levels caused by, I've written it down, noise levels caused by Newcastle 500 supercars potentially pose hearing loss risk. And it states, supercar racing is certainly a noisy sport in Newcastle, with new evidence showing that the noise levels produced while the race is underway could damage hearing. And this comes after the New South Wales Chief Health Officer made a statement saying that nobody standing around or on the balcony of a Newcastle East apartment building during the upcoming racing event could suffer from hearing loss. So residents are highly concerned and want to know if this has been considered by the government. And Deputy Speaker, the location of the site and works that would need to be undertaken is an area that also we'd like to examine. We understand that part of the planned project is on what was the old golf course site, which is a few metres of sand capping atop a rubbish layer that includes medical waste that sits atop 15 to 20 metres of basically black mud. We've heard it referred to as former tip. And that the consistency of toothpaste is almost fluid and prone to uneven settlement, described in this way by the experts. And the State Tennis Centre in the adjacent area, built on a former landfill site, has experienced serious and so far unresolved issues with subsidence, with some parts sinking by as much as half a metre. The State Tennis Centre does not have V8 supercars burning rubber on it, nor gigantic supercar team trucks driving and parking on it, yet it still subsides. So I think the reasonable question to ask is can this area withstand what will come from the extensions that are required to build and then to be able to maintain the level of traffic that will come from the V8 supercars events and other events? And how confident is the Minister that she has budgeted enough for the preliminary site works? Or, Deputy Speaker, might this be another project? Might this be another project that has budget blowouts over time? We've heard when it will be ready by. We've been told, give or take a few million, that the entire project is around about $220 million. And we've also heard in recent days what $220 million could go towards in our health sector and some of the health projects that $220 million could assist. Nonetheless, we've heard from the Premier, Minister and others on the other side that this project is going ahead. And I remind those who are here that the community have said very clearly this is not a project they do not want. And I understand. There are always mixed views about most projects that are proposed in our community. That is a fact of life. And we understand that is what happens. But I have been in this space for a long time, Deputy Speaker. I've been either reporting on the news or presenting the news or somehow involved, whether it's through radio or in other forums in the newspaper, and I do not remember a project that has been as universally disliked, unwanted, with no demand for, as this one, the Burswood Park Motorplex. We see in other reports that there's a suggestion there will be night racing. I'm not sure if those opposite have been able to confirm if there will be night racing, but night racing then will therefore indicate additional infrastructure that will be required. And if this racetrack at Burswood Park, if the organisers and those associated with its construction are going to go to the trouble of putting night racing on the agenda, that means lights going up. They're not going to be cheap. And I would doubt that it would make sense for this night racing venue to be used only once a year. And I appreciate there'll be some cycling, some other walking events. All of those sorts of things could take place now. Burswood Park is a beautiful space. I've been to many community events that the Minister and her team have been responsible for delivering. I went to the Indian celebrations last year. I've been to many other community events. The WA Day Festival, they are great events, but they are now going to have to find another home. And we've heard that Ken, now that we've alerted everybody to it, is not going to have to move from his location near Great Eastern Highway. So if the telethon community cinemas are staying put, where are these community events going to go when the racetrack and the associated infrastructure is built in the area that is central to Burswood Park? And again, as we've heard this week, and I think it is worth noting and worth mentioning, but the $220 million, what could that money do for the Peel Health Campus, for example? What could that money do to expedite the upgrades that are required to Royal Perth and to the development there that is slated to occur, but as yet we're not sure if the budgetary requirements will be in this budget? What else could it do at Meekatharra? What else could it do at those other projects that we have spoken about and heard about in this chamber over the last couple of days? Now, I want to be very clear, and I'm certain that I won't be telling anybody opposite me, anybody on this side, anybody watching live around the world on the broadcast that's going out to millions, I'm sure, that the Liberal Party and our national colleagues do not support this racetrack. Absolutely. We believe that the government should be focusing on different priorities rather than on building a new racetrack at Burswood Park. And again, I ask the question, if there is no community demand, if there has been a dubious or questionable level of community consultation, and certainly none before this development was announced, and of course, the lack of transparency that's gone with all of it, why is this project continuing? And why does the state government feel, in the great raft of important work that we hear about in this chamber, the great many projects that need to be gotten on with to make the lives of Western Australians better, why do they feel that a racetrack at Burswood Park is an idea that has merit, has need, and should have $220 million allocated to it? As I've outlined, there are a lot of questions surrounding the project itself that need to be answered by the Minister. One of those is the community consultation feedback that is available via the website. We've heard, thank you for raising that, we've heard that it's been capped at 140 characters, and that only comments of a certain nature are able to be posted on the website that gathers the community consultation. Now, that's not genuine community consultation. I think if we're going to have community consultation, let's ask people what they think, and if they want to tell you I don't like it, well, Deputy Speaker, it's reasonable to assume that on the page that accepts community consultation, you should be able to say that. I note also that the member for Lansdale, I think, has said that there will be some upcoming community consultation events around football events at Optus Stadium. And I guess that is useful. People will be able to walk in and do that. They might be going to the footy and might sort of be in a bit of a hurry, but nonetheless, I welcome the fact that people will be able to drop in and say personally to whoever it is that is recording the notes, there'll be an opportunity for community consultation. But again, I ask the question, what's the community consultation for when we've heard from members opposite this project is happening? Now, as I prepare to take my seat, I'm sure that will be a joyful moment for those opposite me, and I'm happy to do that. I leave with these reflections. In the sort of 10 days, I think it's only 10 days, member for Kalamunda, that we've been sitting here, it seems to me the gentleman that sits opposite me, the Premier of Western Australia, decent fella. Would we all agree, decent fella? Good bloke. You might even say good bloke, right? And I think the Premier gets this. And I say to the Premier, you're a good fella, good bloke, we respect you, the leadership role that you are in. It's not too late, Premier. It's not too late to say, you know what, we've listened. community that they don't want this project. We've heard from the community that we've made a mistake, and what we're going to do is put our hand up and say, you know what, we've got it wrong, but it's okay, we're not going to go ahead and do it because you don't want it. We've listened, we've heard, we've understood. And far be it from me to give the Premier any advice, obviously, but I reckon, Premier, if you did offer those words and that confession, I think the people of Western Australia would have great respect for you and say, good on you, Premier, thank you for listening, thank you for understanding, no community consultation, no demand, no transparency, no racetrack at Burswood Park. That's a good way to go. Thank you.